Y'all, somehow it's November, and that of course means that we are on the fast track to that holiday busy season. Now, if you're like me, it is very, very difficult to stay on track with things that are for yourself when there are so many other people who need your attention. And that's why today I wanted to give one really simple strategy for moving your book forward, even when everything around you is so busy. That solution is a writing retreat. Stay tuned.
You know that feeling when a book just hits you? Not because the story is wild, but because it's shaped so intentionally that it almost makes you rethink your own story. You finish that last page and think, how did they do that? The structure, the honesty, the clarity. There's something under the surface that you just can't put your finger on. And the reason is, unless someone shows you how memoirs actually work, it's hard to translate that inspiration into your own writing. And that's exactly why we created the Memoir Method Monthly Book Club. If you want to join Emily Thrash every single month to dig into an exemplary memoir and figure out what's happening under the surface, head over to pageandpodium.com/book club. Your first month is free, and we can't wait to welcome you to the group.
Full disclosure, this video was inspired by a writing retreat that I myself went on. My right hand in the Memoir Method, Emily, and I both went down to Hot Springs, Arkansas. It's a nice midpoint for the two of us to meet in the middle. And we spent 4-ish days just working on our individual self-expressive writing projects. Now, I cannot even tell you how delicious this is as two people who spend most of our lives working with other people on their projects. But suffice it to say, it was soul nourishing to have this time spent with a very close friend and my own creative project. And that's why I wanted to hop in with some tips on planning your own writing retreat. Now, before I do that, there are two reasons that a writing retreat can be a very, very successful strategy. And one of them has to do with what I teased in the earlier part of this video, and that is the holidays. The first reason that it can be so helpful to go on a writing retreat is when you know that you are not going to be able to make the steady progress that you want to make, but you still want to give yourself that dopamine burst of getting the work moving forward. In that case, sometimes it is easier to set aside 3 days, 4 days, than it is to find 5 hours a week. In that case, a writing retreat can be an excellent solution. But the other reason that you might want to start a writing retreat, the one that I suspect may even be more relevant to y'all, is that when you are starting a new project, it can be so invigorating to kick it off with a writing retreat, knock out a bunch of words, and then when you sit down for your week to week continuation, you feel so energized. Now, I would say that between Emily and I, we were kind of on those two boats. Emily, on one hand, was feeling really busy, overwhelmed, like she just wasn't having the time to spend on her work. She wanted to bring that work to the writing retreat and really feel like she was making some progress and getting some forward momentum back that had been lost since the earlier kind of drafting portion of her project. Me, on the other hand, I was starting a brand new book. Now, I had put the outline together, but I had not had a chance to sit down and write it. And what I wanted for myself was to skip the part of drafting where you feel like it is just crawling forward at the beginning of the process. Now, that feeling is in no way universal. Some people love the early stages of drafting a new book. I just don't happen to be one of them. I really like it if I can feel like I've got a head start and I'm kind of just continuing that momentum rather than trying to manufacture it in my weekly writing time. So that is what the writing retreat gave to me, was a chance to really knock out. I knocked out about 5 chapters of my book. That makes me feel so good that when I sit down to write, as I actually just did on Sunday, when I sit down to write, I know that I'm not starting a new thing. I'm continuing something that I've already laid really solid groundwork for. So Either of those issues, either not feeling like you have enough time or feeling like you just want a little momentum burst, a surge of forward motion, either of those is a great reason to start a writing retreat. Now, as we go through, you will no doubt see that there is so much flexibility here. And in fact, I will tell you, when I go on writing retreats, when I plan them or join others, I do have certain things that are non-negotiable. There are certain things that must exist for it to be a writing retreat for me. But everybody is different. And I have been on all kinds of writing retreats with all kinds of different structures. And really what it comes down to is learning what works and then sticking to those key strategies. So with that said, let's hop into the things that you need to consider as you are planning a successful writing retreat. The first thing, of course, is you're going to need to plan for the logistics. Now, this looks a lot of different ways and in fact can be deceptively time-consuming. So be sure you leave time for this. The first thing you're really going to want to do is figure out where you want to be. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when Emily and I decided to meet in Hot Springs, it was just simply that it is halfway between our two homes. We knew that we each would have a relatively manageable drive. We could meet in the middle and then head out at the end. It wouldn't be a huge lift to get there. But of course, the actual town is only part of the equation here because you are also going to need a space to use. Now, with the advent of Airbnb, Vrbo, these types of short-term rentals, you have a lot more options than we once did. What you can do is just simply go into any of those short-term rental sites and start looking for places that are inspiring to you. Now, this does not have to mean that it is the fanciest place you've ever been. It does not have to mean that it's, a lap of luxury. It simply has to mean that you can imagine yourself going there and writing, that it's going to feel good to be there and write. Let me give you a couple other things that it's going to be really beneficial to make sure that you have in whatever space you choose, whether it's a short-term rental, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a friend's house, whether it's a convention center, whatever it might be. The first thing you want to make sure that you've got from your logistics is you want to make sure that you have multiple places in that location where you could see yourself enjoying writing. So for me, I know that when I start to get tired, the place that I really want to be for writing is in my bed. So when I am looking for places for a writing retreat, I'm always going to want to look to make sure that, first of all, I will have my own bedroom. And second of all, that I feel like there's a kind of a headboard, I can kind of prop myself up in there and feel really nice and cozy. But I've worked with all kinds of people. One of my very close friends from grad school, she needed to have a patio. Patio writing is what did it for her. So we always needed to make sure that we had a patio that was covered in case of inclement weather so that she would have some place to write. Whatever this looks like for you, you want to just take a little bit of inventory and make sure you're in touch with that. Sometimes you're going to want something like a desk, sometimes a dining room table, sometimes you're going to be perfectly happy on the couch or a nice comfy chair, whatever it might be. But really think about what sorts of space issues do you need to feel like you can be really productive, really inspired, and of course, really comfortable, because that is going to be the name of the game when it comes down to spending 3 entire days writing a new book. It's so exciting, but it does get pretty tiring. Okay, so the first thing you want to look for in that logistics is your specific location. Now, the second thing you're going to want to look for is to make sure that you have access to food nearby. Yes, I know this seems obvious, but I promise it's not. The thing that happens when you get into this writing retreat mode where you are just fingers on the keys, getting words out as fast as you can, is it becomes very easy to forget that you are going to need to sustain yourself physically. We all have to eat. Now, you can tackle this lots of different ways. For Emily and I, Emily is an excellent cook. Her mother was a caterer and it shows. So she had offered to make some things in advance to bring some simple groceries so that she could make some meals for us there. But we also needed to make sure for us that we had access to a couple of different things. One, I wanted there to be food delivery. Sometimes I can have my worst habit come out, which is where I will suppress all of my needs just to get the thing done. And in that case, I need to be able to get food. I need to be able to have some food come to me. So this is both through groceries, snacks that Emily had picked up, but it was important to me that we were somewhere where we could get some sort of meal delivery, food delivery. And the second thing that is so important to me when we think about writing retreat food is I gotta celebrate. To me, that is the most important step in moving your project forward consistently. So I always want to make sure that we have nice restaurants around that are going to be delicious and fun and yummy. I like to have kind of a fun cocktail, so I'm kind of looking for places that have that kind of thing. Whatever it might be that you need to feel really comforted and really celebratory, you want to make sure that you've got access to that in terms of your food. And then the third thing that you want to make sure you have in your location, this is perhaps obvious, but let me throw it out there. You want to make sure you have Wi-Fi. Now, when you're writing, it can be very, very tempting to say, oh, I don't want Wi-Fi because I don't want to be on the internet anyway. I am not here to tell anybody that your strategy is not a good one, but what I will say is nothing is going to derail you faster than needing to look something up real quick and not being able to. So let me highly, highly, highly recommend that you don't control your internet use by depriving yourself of Wi-Fi. Instead, let's figure out a different way to keep yourself off of social media scrolling. That is important, but make sure that you've got access to the tech tools that you need, because when that stops you, it's really, really hard to get going again. Okay, so as you're thinking about those logistics, make sure that you are going to be taken care of, comfortable, that you are going to feel really safe and secure. That's kind of the theme of this whole thing. Our best creativity is only going to come out when we feel really, really secure and safe. Okay, the second thing you need to think about is how that writing retreat is going to play out. Now, you do not need a highly detailed agenda. You could do that if you wanted to, but what you do want to do is think about how many days do you want to write. Let me strongly recommend that you do not plan to write the day you arrive. For me personally, that has never ever worked. Mileage may vary, but I did want to think about how many days did I feel I could sustain that level of mental energy, mental effort without really feeling burned out when I got home. What you don't want to do is have your writing retreat be so long that when you get home, you cannot even imagine picking that project up again. We are not trying to burn ourselves out. At the same time, you don't want your writing retreat to be so short that you are just getting into the rhythm of it and then it's time to go. So, what does this look like? In my experience, 2 to 3 days is pretty much what you're going to do. Now, Emily and I got to Hot Springs on Thursday night. We left Monday morning, so that left us exactly 3 days of writing, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Both of us had agreed we didn't want to write Thursday night. We haven't seen each other in person. Of course, we see each other all the time. We hadn't seen each other in person in a while. We wanted to really have that Thursday to kind of chat, catch up, hang out a little bit. And then, of course, Monday, you're getting your stuff ready to go, packing up, cleaning up the Airbnb, whatever it might be. For us, those 3 days worked really well. I will tell you, at the end of that third day, I was pretty tired. I had kind of foolishly thought that I would push another chapter out at the end of the day, and I ended up having to just kind of, be okay with the fact that I had really overextended myself. That's really common. But in the end, that 3-day window worked really, really, really well for us. Now, I want to point out a couple things when you're thinking about kind of the agenda, how this is going to go. The first thing is, you do actually want to think about whether you want to go by yourself or with others. As I mentioned, this one was just me and Emily, but I've also done lots of writing retreats. I have done many, many writing retreats with my 2 BFFs from grad school. The 3 of us used to go every single year. And then I've also done larger writing retreats that were put on by an institution or organization of some kind, where you're writing with 20, 30 people, all spread out across a really big building. What I want you to think about is what is going to be the most helpful balance of, 1, holding yourself accountable, having someone else see if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, but 2, making sure that you don't feel responsible for entertaining other people, for motivating other people, for competing with other people. All of these things can happen. So you really want to be thoughtful about what type of group you would like to spend that time with. Keep in mind that even though you're writing, you are in pretty close proximity with each other the whole time. So you do kind of have to move back and forth between that individual creative expression and socializing with the people that you're with. Sometimes this is so valuable. You can try your ideas out on that other person. Emily and I did this so much, but sometimes it can be distracting. So make sure that you're being really thoughtful about that. And the other piece of the agenda that I want you to think about, that I teased already, and that is my favorite part, is I want you to think about how you will celebrate. When you reach the end of this 3-day writing retreat, you have done something pretty amazing. Now, I am not going to share word counts here because I think your word count is going to depend on what type of work you're doing, as well as your just general speed of writing. It's not a contest, but when you are thinking about making that kind of progress, it's kind of a big deal. So what I always recommend is that you wrap up that retreat with some kind of celebration. Now, I told you already, the thing that I like to do is go have a nice dinner with my writing pals, whoever that might be. I like to make sure that we can have a nice drink, we can really enjoy ourselves, kind of kick back, and congratulate ourselves. I really think it is so important that we spend this time being proud of our proud accomplishments. And when you plan out in your agenda to have a nice dinner, have a nice celebration at the end, you really are reinforcing that what you did was something really, really valuable. Now, this does not have to be a dinner. There are all kinds of things you can do. And in fact, y'all know me, I'm never one for just one celebration. So the other thing that I like to do, highly recommend you do this too, is have some sort of a large visual depiction of how y'all are doing. So one thing, and this is going to kind of tease into my next point, one thing that I really like to do on my writing retreats is list out what my goals are, break those goals down by what I want to accomplish each day. I want to have my writing partners all do that too, and then we will hang that chart in some central location. The magical thing that happens here is then everyone has to come in to check off each of their smaller goals as they accomplish them. And that's so fun. There is nothing more fun than knowing that you are making progress toward your goal and then seeing that your friend is too. And in fact, even when things are not going well for you, sometimes just seeing that other people are crushing it can be really motivating to get yourself kind of back on track, get yourself back focused, really realign yourself with what you're trying to do. So as you're thinking through your agenda, not only should you be thinking about how long you want to be there, who you want to go with, I also really want you to think about how are you going to check in with each other, encourage each other, support each other, and most of all, celebrate. Okay, the third tip and the final tip for putting together a powerful writing retreat is I want you to set goals, but I don't want you to be precious about them. Now, let me tell you a little bit about what I mean here. Most of the time, when we're thinking about a writing retreat, the ideal thing to be working on is going to be something you're drafting. Now, you've been watching this channel, there are all different stages to any book. We always have to go through the development. We always have to go through the drafting. We always have to go through the revising. Any of those can work for a writing retreat. But what I find is that drafting is the sweet spot because it lets us set concrete, objective goals. When we think about drafting, we can put a literal word count, or we can put a chapter. We know we have really a bound idea of what we're doing. You can go on a writing retreat and do development, but one thing about development is sometimes having a little space can be really helpful. Doing a little draft, walking away for a couple days, revisiting it. A writing retreat, that's not going to work as well as some other things. And then revising. Revising does work for a writing retreat. In fact, that is what Emily was working on our retreat. But revising can be hard because it doesn't have such defined goals. You can make a list of things you want to accomplish, but oftentimes when you're revising, there's so many decisions that you have to make, and they can really make you feel like your progress is slow. Drafting is really the sweet spot for a writing retreat. So when you're thinking about what do you want to be working on, then I want you to go a step further. Now, if you have an outline, this is a very useful tool for planning your writing retreat goals. This is what I did. I outlined before the writing retreat. I got feedback on my outline and revised it specifically before the writing retreat, because my plan was that I wanted to get a couple chapters knocked out the first day, a couple chapters the second day, and then I did want to the third day. It was just one, and that's totally fine. But I was able to use that outline to plan out what I wanted to accomplish. And then when I sat down to actually do the work at the writing retreat, I had really clear instructions. My outline told me what I needed to be writing. And this is part of the key here, is that when we're setting our goals, we do need to make sure that we've got enough structure to accomplish them. We need to make sure that we have set ourselves up to achieve that goal. But we also need to know that our goals are just guesses. We really cannot force ourselves to do something that is not wanting to be done. My chapter 6 did not get written on the writing retreat, but you know what? It got written on the Sunday after I got back. That's totally fine. So as you are moving forward, the first thing is I want you to set up a plan, set some goals for what you want to accomplish, but then be gentle with yourself. And the second piece of this is that I also want you to make sure you have thought through what tools you will need to make that progress. Now, I already mentioned an outline. If you don't have an outline, I cannot recommend strongly enough that you put your outline together before you go on a writing retreat. Unfortunately, once you get to that third day, you are going to feel really tired, and it's going to be really difficult to come up with the types of things that you're going to need to come up with on the fly without an outline. So the more you can set yourself up with a plan through an outline, the better. But the outline is not the only thing you might need. Make sure that you have thought about, do you need research? Are there things that you need to pull from the internet so that you don't end up in a rabbit hole when you're there? Do that research, figure out how to annotate it, collate it, get it organized so you've got what you need. Do you need notes? Are you somebody who is going to work a lot better if you have kind of bullet points of what you want to cover? Make those notes now for every chapter that you want to knock out. That way, you don't have to trust yourself after a day and a half of frantic writing to come up with the next thing. You're not going to be able to. Make the plan and set yourself up. And then finally, do you need any kind of software? Do you need any kinds of external tools that are going to make your work easier? Make sure you've thought through that, because once you are at the writing retreat, needing something that you can't get easily is going to derail your progress. And that can be just a really depressing feeling, honestly, when we know we have poured so much into this retreat and we don't have what we need. Okay, so to wrap this up, if you are thinking of doing a writing retreat, it can be such an excellent way to move forward, both if you're feeling like you don't have the time to make that steady incremental progress, or if you want to really give yourself kind of a boost at the beginning of a project, really build that momentum up very quickly in a condensed amount of time. If either of these situations apply to you, I cannot recommend strongly enough that you put a writing retreat together. These are not as hard as they seem. All of us just have to kind of start and figure out what we like, but it can be so fun to gather in a community, gather with friends, and work on these projects that we care about so deeply. Highly recommend it. Reach out to me if I can help with this, and don't forget to like, rate, share, review, subscribe, all of those things. It really does help us reach more people who need our messages. Until then, happy writing.
You've been writing your memoir, maybe even for years. You know your material, you know what it means. What's missing isn't the story, it's the structure. And that's why we started the Memoir Method Book Club. Every single month, Emily Thrash, a professional writer and editor, teaches you how to read like a writer by breaking down a published memoir and showing you what it's doing under the surface. Your first session is free. Head over to pageandpodium.com/book club to sign up.